Imagine, for a moment, what your childhood would have been like if your own parents saw you as a project to change everything about who you were. Imagine them believing it was their righteous duty to convert you, to erase the race and beliefs you were born with, and to mold you into someone completely different. It's a deeply unsettling thought, isn't it? To have the very foundation of your identity treated as something wrong, something that needs to be fixed. For countless indigenous peoples around the world, this wasn't just a thought experiment. It was a brutal, lived reality enforced by assimilation policies. This wasn't about parents, but about governments and institutions that systematically removed children from their homes, families, and communities. These children were taken and raised in cultures that were not their own, often in residential or boarding schools. The goal was explicit: to civilize them by stripping away their heritage. They were forbidden from speaking their native languages, practicing their spiritual traditions, or wearing their cultural clothing. Every connection to their roots was deliberately and violently removed. The idea was that by isolating them from their families and culture, they would forget who they were and be absorbed into the dominant society. Then you have the reality that these children grew up to have children, being born into an embedded system of removal and placement. These children were removed as a policy. Some were conceived through violent abuse, often to mothers who were children themselves, others to women on the run, trying to escape their captors, or the memories of their experiences through drug and alcohol. So who are you when you feel part of a culture that you were taken from? Often, we are raised in families that continue the religious necessity of conversion, seeing you as a religious mission, not a child taken from a broken history. So it is not the love of a family that makes you feel welcome. It is the fulfillment of their religious quest that opens the door. You are not raised with love, but a commitment to values that are as foreign to you as trying to mix oil and water. But the moment you try and find your way back to the culture you were taken from, you are seen as an outsider. White passing, Wande, half-breed, and the many terms you meet with depending on the culture you were taken from. So again you are faced with requirements to be welcome, requirements that no matter how hard you try, you will never meet them. So you walk a life in the in-between, a life you never chose, but it chose you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, A Box with No Lid. A channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness around the lived reality of trauma and complex trauma and removal trauma, the world that is adoption and the world that is foster care, but I really want to bring forward what I've learned through my own personal journey and my own personal experiences as I am an adoptee, as well as my many years as an advocate and as a practitioner. All with the simple hope of, yes, bringing awareness and understanding to the reality removal creates and placement creates. But I also want to help provide the information in the hopes that it helps you guys put your puzzles together so that you can find and create the resources that you so rightly deserve and need to have the lives you deserve and to finally heal. You know, being around this stuff for so long and all the advocacy side of things, there are so many areas that are misunderstood that create these repetitive cycles that feed our survival state, the fog, the survival state created by our removal and placement, that separate us from everything that we so desperately want to be truly part of. And as you can tell by the claymation, this video is, well, one, it is very difficult because it is a part of my own story. But I know of so many others in the same boat. When you look at the assimilation policies of indigenous people, when you look in the countries of Africa and colonization around the world, everywhere, in Europe, everywhere, where a dominant society has controlled an indigenous population and have done everything they can to assimilate, a process gets created in amongst, a mechanism gets created in that process of assimilation. And the harm that that mechanism causes to people, to human beings, doesn't magically disappear because it happened a century ago or 50 years ago or even a couple of centuries ago. When you understand the structures of generational trauma, when you understand the structures of epigenetics, it is plainly evident to see its aftermath. And when you have situations with Indigenous populations through abuse and institutions, through reservations and residential schools and boarding schools, and here in Australia, the missions for the Aboriginals, and the harm and the destructiveness that that caused on a social structure of Indigenous people, there needs to be the understanding of what that creates, because these people that are so abused, that go through these processes, have children, and they have children, and I'm one of those children. And the mechanism of removal is so embedded within the system that any mixed race Indigenous within a lot of countries is still forcibly removed at birth, or the parents are so intimidated and forced to relinquish at birth for adoption. It happens here in Australia, it happens in the States and in Canada, it happens everywhere, where colonization and assimilation policies are still actively pursued, and they still are in so many Western countries. What happens? What does that mean? For me, from my own personal journey, I was so opposite to those that were raising me, and the problems that created took my childhood and took my ability to build a life that I hoped for, that led me to learn everything I've learned, to do everything I've tried to do through the practitioner and advocate days, to create change and to help people heal, and to create the understandings to not only heal but to stop this stuff from happening again. But it took my life and my ability to have a life. I got on a plane, journey to the States to try to find paths to find biological family, and that's where I learned what a wannabe actually is treated like, what it means, what white passing, because I'm mixed race. Both my parents were mixed race First Nations, so I could pass as a Western person, as a white person, and I was accepted by individuals, but I was never accepted by community, and that played straight into everything around my childhood, the fog and the survival state created by removal. My mother ran to escape family violence as a result of reservations and residential schools. That cycle continues, and it feeds this ever-present mechanism within a person's trauma and their survival states when this gets continually reinforced every time we're reminded of it. In my journeys, I've met so many other mixed race Indigenous people who have grown up either in the foster care system or were adopted into non-Indigenous families and raised in a culture outside of their ancestry, who have tried to find their way home and are met with the same wall. Yes, the wall is understandable. This is not a criticism and blaming Indigenous people for not welcoming these mixed race babies and children when they're turned up, because there's so much assimilation harm that's been done. And there are so many that have come to Indigenous communities in the wrong way because they've never learned the protocols of how to approach, that has created this vast, complex, freaking mess that will take generations, if ever, to resolve. But needs to be, as the whole purpose of the videos I make on this channel are all revolving around just creating that understanding of, yes, there's this huge mess and there's an outcome of that mess. And the outcome of that mess is there are so many of us that we walk in the in-between. We're not part of this society. We're not part and welcomed in that society. We walk as ghosts in the shadow of what we hope to be in the in-between. And our purpose for this path, and I've even talked with elders about that, and they've given me the understandings for this purpose, is to bring awareness. We reflect the harm that the world has done, that colonizers have done to the colonized. We, by our very existence, is a mirror reflecting that harm. And this is why society doesn't want us. Society wants to pretend that it happened so long ago and that the aftermath is forgotten and they cannot be held accountable. Yes, you can, because we are the reflection of it. And whilst we are still here, there is still accountability for every society for the way it treated the Indigenous people and the generational consequences of it. And we have to have the courage to remain in that space of being as kind and as human being as possible. As hard as it is for us to carry that burden, but also with that hope that things may change. As I said, I've journeyed back to the States, and in Canada I've spent years following every protocol in the book and doing everything I can to support Indigenous and First Nation communities. And I've always been seen as an outsider, and I expect that I always will be. I accept that. But I also understand that my very existence is a reflection to that harm, a trigger. I'm just me standing there saying and doing nothing is a trigger to what was done and what needs to happen to create change. And I need to understand that it's part of that process of being an outsider. It is an ugly burden to carry, but it is something that has a purpose to it. Part of why I make these videos, part of why I make this channel, part of why I stand on podiums over the years and have said and done everything I've tried to do to create change. It's not something that I like, it's not something that I want, but it is part of being that mirror. As I said, guys, this one's a personal one, but I do know so many others in the same boat as me. And I really hope that all of you out there that don't come from a mixed race understanding understand what it is we carry and why we are the way we are. And why sometimes we may go a little over the top in trying to hold on to that Indigenous culture and make the mistakes that we do in the beginning till we learn other ways. But again, it's an awareness. Awareness is always key. I hope you guys understand this video and give it the respect that it's deserved. Please be mindful, please be respectful. And please like and share and subscribe and support the channel. I love you guys' comments and feedback, and I will see you all next time.